Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. I'm Miss Honeydrop. In this video I will be talking about the concept of heaven and hell. Heaven is real, heaven is not real, hell is not real, all those things. This video by Lil Nas and the controversy, its cousin. I saw the video and I'm like, okay, I think it's time to visit this topic because I didn't want to go into it for a very long time. You know, I've known some of these things for quite a while, but it's a very controversial topic, so I try my best to stay clear of it. But you know, I decided not to shy away this time. Let's just address it because people are losing their minds over so many misconceptions that no one has cared enough to put right, or maybe the information is not reaching the people it should, so we'll be addressing it. As you know, the Torah is the first Bible that existed. These are the 5 books that were given to Moses on the Mount Sinai. There's a oral Torah, and there's also the written version of the Torah. Now, this Torah, before I move on, there's also another one called the Tanakh. The Tanakh has 24 books. I think that's the one that kind of completes the rest of the Bible. These books were translated from Hebrew to Greek. This Greek Bible was meant for people who lived in Egypt, the Jews, the Greek-speaking Jews living in Egypt at the time. And this book was called the Septuagint. Now, this Septuagint wasn't accepted by the Jewish people because they thought to themselves, this is a whole mess. This is a pile of shit. Because there were so many mistakes in the translation from Hebrew to Greek. And most Jewish people just abandoned it and didn't have anything to do with it altogether because they just thought, you've messed with our holy book. This is not the idea of it. This isn't what we were told. You have mistranslated it. Now, bearing that in mind that it's not an accepted book by the Jews, the original owners, this is the idea of the Bible in general is a cultural book for the Hebrew. Moving forward, we find that all of the translation that came after the Septuagint came from the Septuagint, including the Slavonic version, the Ethiopic version, Arabic, the German, Latin, English, all of them were taken out of a book of error. Bearing in mind that there was a lot of mistake already made in the Septuagint. All other books took their interpretation, or should I say translation, from the Septuagint that already had a lot of mistakes in it. And they started translating. Now, moving to the English version, I'm not going to go into too much details about the other ones because the one I want to talk about is really the English version. This English version was first translated by a scholar whose name was Wycliffe John. Wycliffe John was a Protestant in his time. He had a movement. They were not they didn't stand for anything that had to do with the Roman Catholic Church. And so they started translating the Bible from Hebrew and Greek to English, or more or less. There was already a Latin version in widespread all over Europe at that time, in the 1300 something, I don't remember the exact date. They translated the Bible from Greek to and Hebrew to English, and some kind of vernacular Latin was already moving in between, in and out. But because it was not an accepted version of Bible, anyone who was found with it was put to death at that time. Even though they had completed the original version in 1384, they completed the Bible. But because many people were put to death, these books were lost in the process. So another person who is also Protestant, his name was William Tyndale. I think, if I'm not getting Tyndale. William Tyndale then did his own Greek Hebrew translation of the biblical text to English. So let's just say it's more or less kind of like a descendant or a follower of Wycliffe John, who had started the process of translating the Bible. But it is the William Tyndale's version that is widespread as the translation from Hebrew Greek to English. And then he got the chance to print his one in his time. In 1506 it was completed. It was around that time, I think, King James was the ruler in the country at the time. Fast forward. In the process of all this translation back and forth, a lot of things had been taken out of the Bible. A lot of words had been replaced with the original words from Hebrew to English. And if there's anything from personal experience I have seen or I've come to see when it comes to translating another language to English, is that many times you struggle to find the right fit of English word or use of sentence to explain what you're trying to say. Even now, I still struggle with that when I'm trying to translate something from my local dialect to English. It's a struggle because I can't really find the right fit for it in English language. So they had this problem. And so as a result of that, there were many things in the Bible that were mistranslated, completely going from what it really meant to something else. And this is how the problem started. Also, because the text, the Bible, was a weapon. It was something used to create fear in the mind of the subject by the Roman Catholic Church, by the kings in that time, by anyone who was in leadership, the emperor, and so on. The Bible was used to create fear in people's mind. It was a weapon that they used, and it worked for them greatly at the time. So if it worked for them, did you not think that they would have added and removed some things? So if you do this, you will go to hell. If you do that, you will go to heaven. Their self-created heaven. None of that exists in truth and fact. That is number one. Number two, not everything in the Bible is literal. A lot of things are idioms, some are symbolic, some things are just analogies or parable, to put it that way. Parables. Not everything in the Bible is literal. Not everything that was written down, even in the Bible we're reading in today's, in this generation, not every single word is literal. Not on everything happened as a true life event. Some of them were created as an example to teach people lesson of life. So I could cook up some story just to create a scenario for maybe young people I'm talking to, and then it is recorded in the text as these are the texts of Miss Honeydrop in her time, in her life and time, or whatever. And then people who read it in future would take it on as an actual event. It's not an actual event. It was just an example or some kind of story I cooked up to give them, to tell them to make a point to them, to teach them about life, to, you get what I'm trying to say. I mean, these things there are so many of them in the New Testament where Jesus keeps speaking in parable. He will say one thing, but it really means something else, but it's just using that as an example, and so on and so forth. Now, you would ask me that, okay, fine, whatever, we hear you, but how did the mark of the beast come to be? Okay. First of all, before I even go to how the number 666 came to be, markings, or what do I call it? You can even call it a form of tattoo. I would even say that's how tattoo came to be. In the time of slavery, any slave that made effort to run away, when they are able to catch them, they put a mark on their forehead, FUG, usually meaning fugitive. Another reason why people get markings are because of the soldiers who belong to one person, maybe a rich man in one town able to have his own soldiers would put a mark, a stamp on the hand of the soldiers to differentiate his own soldier from another person's soldier. Number 2 reason why they get the mark. Number 3, people put marks on animals. This one is still done in this age. If you look at documentaries, you'll see some cows with tags hanging, like a yellow tag hanging on their ears or something like that. This is meant to differentiate animals, my animal from my neighbor's animal, so people don't start getting funny ideas in their head that, oh, that cow looks chunky, looks big and fat and voluptuous, I want it, it's mine. No, I've got a sign on it that says this is mine. It's got my logo on it. Mark is branding. Branding bears your name, your logo. In this time and age, the way people's businesses and brands are differentiated from other people's one and noticed is through branding and logo. I mean, the moment you see 3 stripes on a trainers, you're thinking Adidas or Adidas, however you want to pronounce it, or you're thinking Nike. These are the 2 things that come to your mind when you see that check sign, like a marking. You think of Nike trainers. You're not thinking of Fubu. You're not thinking of what's the New Balance. You're not thinking of that. You're thinking of, oh yeah, those are definitely Nike trainers. When you see a man jumping on the trainers, you're thinking of Jordan, Air Jordan, or whatever it's called. I'm not really good with trainers. I'm just using this as examples. This is how you know the difference between one brand of shoe from the other. This is how the idea of branding and logo has come to be. Now, all these things were happening between the slaves, the soldiers, and also that some people's way of showing allegiance to a certain god or a certain ruler was also having a mark on their hand, on their forehead. These were all the reasons why marking started. Now, going back to the time of the Roman Empire or the Roman imperial court, there were people who bear the mark to differentiate them from everyone else. And this gave them access into commercial activities, going into the market, doing things. They could enter certain places that other people couldn't have access to because they had a certain mark on them. I mean, take for instance, what was that thing? The wristband that people wear to concerts. If you don't have the wristband on, you're not getting into the concert arena. So that was kind of the idea of markings and stamps on people's skin. They show that, okay, this one is got allegiance and reverence for the emperor. This was also a way of showing respect to the emperor at that time. I think the emperor at that time was Nero Caesar. And he wanted people to more or less worship him because it was just like that, edited. So, these markings on their hand, on their head was just to show allegiance. It was more symbolic than literal, but these things were mistaken. Now, moving forward, 666. How did it come to be? 666 is actually Nero Caesar's number, and I will explain. In those times, people changed their name, the equivalent of their name, to numbers and stamp it on themselves. They also do it for lovers. So let's say I love my partner, is the equivalent of his name in number form would be stamped on my skin. More or less saying tattooing someone's name on your skin. It's the same madness going on in this time and age, you know. And also that particular 666 number, when translated in Hebrew, when you calculate the number of Caesar's name, the total number gives you 666. But in Latin, if you calculate the same number, his name, it gives you 616. So you see the problem started with Hebrew and Latin. This is where the problem started from. And this number was used on, there's something called the charagma. The charagma mark was used on documents and on coins. So on letters, if they're sending a letter, once it bears that marking, they know, okay, this is from the emperor. They take that letter serious because they know it's coming straight from Caesar, and they have to obey anything that is written in it. That is how his number. So that number differentiates him from just any other ruler, because I'm believing that any other person under his office, but was also in a position, captain or whatever. I don't know. I'm not really good with position in the army and things like that. But people under him who had ranks would also have their own number to differentiate them. And 666 made him stand out because that was the number of the emperor at that time. And anyone who saw it has to obey it, because we know how much the Jews were killed by the Romans in the time when they took over. That being said, this number is just chaotic. Whoever didn't have it at that time couldn't do a lot of commercial activities. And the New Age Christian of the time who were coming into Christianity, rather than following the typical Roman Catholic method, they suffered a lot because they refused to get the mark. And for that reason, they couldn't have access to a lot of things. And even when they were found, they were slaughtered, they were maimed, they were, you know, all kinds of unthinkable things were done to them. And so this is why the Revelation talks about, I think Revelation 13 to 16 to 18 talks about, oh, not being able to do commercial activities if you don't have the mark. That is actually speaking in past tense, because it's not speaking about this time and age or futuristically. It was talking about that time when they couldn't do anything commercial because they refused to get the mark. That is how the number has come to be. But the problem with the Bible is all in a mix-up and mess-up in translation. A lot of things were not properly translated, and this has caused a lot of problem, messing with people's head. You know? And then the concept of heaven and hell, like I said before, were fear-based concepts created to rule people. You do this, you go to heaven. You don't do this, you go to hell. I mean, how does someone tell you that if you do one or two things or the other, you're going to get 10 virgins? You're going to be given a... See, God doesn't work that way. And if you know anything about reincarnation, you will understand that when you die, you're not going to hell, you're not going to heaven, you're just going into an afterlife, a place of reflection, to think about the life you've just lived and how you plan for your next life, so that the mistakes you made in this time, you will not repeat it again. Why is God sending us to this earth? For us to come and exist, for our growth, for an experience. You know, there are many ways to explain it, but that's the way I can, you know, put it. We come to earth to have an experience, to develop our consciousness, and then to return back to Him. So this is the first part of this video. I'll try and do the second part just to cover a little bit of more information that I had missed out in this. Thank you so much for listening. I'll be back.